This is Satoshi Tajiri. He lived in a town called Machida, which before Tokyo's residential boom in the 1970s, it was a quiet, rural town where he spent most of his childhood doing one thing, that was collecting insects. He was so obsessed with catching and collecting insects, earning the nickname Dr. Bug among his classmates. But as the town transitioned from rural to urban and residential, the fishing ponds disappeared and the forests got paved over. After Tajiri lost the natural environments and doing what he loved, he wanted to recreate it. He wanted to have kids experience the same joy that he did, collecting, catching, learning about creatures. That idea would eventually become the biggest Meteors franchise in history. This is Pokemon.
So here's the thing about Tajiri. He's kind of like, Akira Toriyama. Not many people know much about him outside of the very little interviews and articles and things that he may have done throughout the years. Which is why I think it's important to talk about the history and highlight some of the things that he talked about in the very little that we do know. In 1981, he did create Game Freak. It was actually a magazine that was handwritten all about arcades and the secrets and Easter eggs that he discovered. Around 1986, an illustrator ended up joining named Ken Sugimori. That name will probably be recognizable throughout the history of Game Freak because he ended up making and illustrating all of the 151 Pokemon when it first came out. In 1989, they ended up pivoting from a game magazine company to a game development company. Which, I don't know who would do that, pivot from something kind of related to something completely different. Who would do that? Anyway, their first game was Quinty. It released in arcades with a pretty familiar art style. Namco picked it up in Japan and Nintendo in the US. It had okay success, but didn't really compare to what happened next. In 1990, Tajiri ended up discovering the Game Link cable. He saw Tetris where you can link them up from one Game Boy to another and see each other's screens, but not very many other games, or really any other games at the point, did anything else with it. He wanted a game where you can store creatures, trade them, battle them, etc. He ended up pitching the idea to Nintendo, which at the time, they're like, okay, that's cool, I guess. Don't really get it. And the Game Boy's probably on its way out, but whatever. But there's one person who ended up being a believer in him, and that was Miyamoto. The same Miyamoto who ended up making all of these. Miyamoto was actually one of the reasons why Red and Blue was a thing. Tajiri originally wanted it to be its own game and have every cartridge to be serialized or numbered.
Miyamoto ended up giving the reason so that way people have more reason to trade. The other part of that was that Tajiri joked about trying to surpass Mario. In order to do that, they would have to sell twice as many copies to each person. So they did. A lot of things happened during the 6 years of development. They almost went bankrupt, the code was almost lost, Tajiri was not taking a salary. But eventually it was released. And the rest is history.
All right, before I continue, I'm probably not going to talk about Pokemon history itself, probably just focusing on the TCG stuff because there is so much to Pokemon. There's so much history to it, and I think there's a lot of other people who can do it better than I can.
1 month before the actual TCG launched in September 1996, Bandai actually released Pokemon Card Ass. Although you couldn't play a game with them, these were technically the first Pokemon cards ever made.
Bandai Card Ass でファイルしよう Card Ass Pocket Monster Anime Collection.
Then in 1997, Top Sun released gum cards. These are 2 cards plus 2 sticks of apple-flavored gum. These have the 1995 copyright date, which technically is incorrect. This was just Pokemon as a property, but not the cards themselves. Either way, they didn't stop collectors from collecting them and pricing them to infinity. A mint condition blueback no-number Charizard from this set sold for nearly $500,000 in 2021. The actual TCG launched in Japan in October 1996. It was developed by Creatures Inc. and it was published by Media Factory. There were 102 cards, which is completely different from like the 300 or so that get released now. Between then and 98, a few things did happen. It did get popular, but the infamous Porygon episode did air in Japan, which is funny because Porygon took the fall for Pikachu, who used Thunderbolt to destroy incoming missiles, resulting in a red and blue strobe effect. Almost 700 children were hospitalized with seizures, and Nintendo stock fell a good 3%. Then the anime went on a 4-month hiatus. But in 1998, that did not stop the TCG from coming to America through Wizards of the Coast. This basically kicked off the Wizards era, or WotC. Thick borders, big set symbols, the design that defined Pokemon cards for generations. Then in 1999, Pokemania hits full force.
But while adults might be mystified, might tut-tut about unhealthy obsessions and manipulation, there's no escaping Pokemon, the biggest thing for kids since Mickey Mouse.
States as an animated series on Saturday mornings, and with that comes all of the merchandise, as you know, and with that came this game, these trading cards. Now, in the last report, the mother said these are collector's items. Now, it's interesting to me, the kids are playing with these. I'm wondering how many parents are buying these at $6, $8 a pop and shoving them in the drawer, putting them in the plastic cases to send their kids to college in 20 years.
Well, they don't really think that they will be.
Well,
the 2000s was an interesting time for Pokemon. In 2002, Wizards released e-reader cards. They had dot codes where you could scan into Game Boy accessories for bonus content. It didn't do well, and you can tell because it was discontinued by 2004. But before that, Nintendo decided to take the TCG in-house through the Pokemon Company, and WotC did not like this. They didn't like this so much that they threatened if Nintendo retracted the license, Wizard would flood the market with product. And when they did lose the license anyway, there were reports saying that they dumped most of their entire warehouse supply. And on September 30th, 2003, Wizard's license officially expired. Literally the next day, on October 1st, they sued Nintendo. The lawsuit accused Pokemon USA of poaching 7 key employees. And in a few months in December, the case closed. The terms were never discussed publicly. Skyridge became Wizard's final set, which included some of the e-reader cards I spoke about. And because of this, it had a really limited print run. Those cards are some of the most valuable in the game's history now. And in 2004 to 2016, it was actually pretty quiet. 2004 brought the first official World Championship in Orlando. The EX era was introduced. It was a powerful basic Pokemon that gave up 2 prizes instead of 1, which of course is a mechanic that's still used today. Tons of sets were released. Diamond and Pearl brought back the Level X cards. Black and White introduced full art cards, which is kind of a big deal since it is a collector's game and all of the art was already great. During this time, ever since the World Championship started, the competitive scene grew pretty steadily. Most of the mainstream attention have kind of moved on. But in 2016 came the 20th anniversary. Evolutions reprinted base cards with original artwork. This means the original artwork stayed, but it had updated stats. Pokemon Go launched around this time as well.
This guy looks like he's playing. It's so easy to recognize other players.
Players on a mission.
And that brung in millions of adults and more nostalgia.
And while the hype did die down for Pokemon Go, the 2020s didn't exactly slow things down. COVID was the perfect storm. People were bored and at home trying to find something to do, and Pokemon Go players were stuck at home because they couldn't go out. Pair that with layoffs and job freezes, people were just looking for things to do and ways to make money. And unfortunately, there was Logan Paul. The Blonde Plague helped the idea of Pokemon being an investment. And then also, people my age started to figure out that their old cars were actually worth something. You pair that with streamers, whatnot creators, and influencers posting everything and anything about buying product and promos, you get a big problem for the everyday person. After mobs of crowds and arrests, and one dude who spent 60 grand of COVID relief funds on a Charizard, the hype did die down a bit. Then, in 2024, the Pokemon Company did two things. First, they lowered the production of cards to somewhat the normal pace, since they did raise it up a bit in COVID. Then, they released Pokemon Pocket TCG. It's hard to say for me personally that I enjoy Pocket TCG because it is essentially a pack opening simulator. You can open a pack once a day for free, or you can pay a monthly subscription to open more. There's a way to battle, but it is a very watered down version of the TCG. Millions of people downloaded this, and even more after they released immersive cards. Well, this leads to the question, what about the game today? If you're like me and never played Pokemon before or have been in the ecosystem, then everything might be a little bit overwhelming. I think the decision that I had to make was if I wanted to be a player or a collector, and it's not mutually exclusive. You can be both, but it is a thought to have when you do get into Pokemon. But there are a few bright sides of being a player or a collector. As a player, unfortunately, you'll never be able to get packs at MSRP or find them at a store at a regular basis, but singles are dirt cheap. And if you look on Limitless or any of these other deck list websites, the decks to build or the competitive decks to build are also very affordable. You can find regional or world championship decks, and they're usually under $100. Not to mention, the game itself is actually still and always has been very simple. If you come from different TCGs that didn't have very much support or a lot of things going for it, you would be pretty happy to be a player in the Pokemon TCG. There are tons of resources to learn the game, and for me, I prefer the Pokemon TCG live client. The rank system's whatever, but there are different formats you can play, and there is a rotation that is indicated by the cards itself or whenever the Pokemon Company posts about it. I also really like the tutorial that the TCG client uses because it helped me to quickly learn the game and put that in practice right after. And personally, I played a few different decks, ended up playing like Mamoswine and Greninja, and I even played when I was traveling. And I think that's a testament to show how much I actually did like the client. And then there's the play program where you have access to all the resources for local events and the league, and as well as regional events, which has like top tier streams and as well as just more things to do other than playing the game. And the Pokemon Company puts all their games together, like the video games and the TCGs and everything else, so you can just be in that ecosystem. Me, I ended up going to one of my local game stores. I was very thankful that they even remember me because I don't go to locals anymore anywhere. I was suggested to get some starter decks and a Trainer Toolkit for staples. Shout out to Darian. As a collector though, it is a little more difficult. The other part about being a collector is that it depends on what you want to collect. You kind of have to have something in mind because there are so many cards out there, and it depends on what Pokemon is your favorite. Your favorite could be mine, which is Absol. The most expensive card for that I know of is like $50 or $60. But then again, if your favorite Pokemon is Dragonite, it could be completely different. And it also depends on if you want modern or vintage, or if you want promos, or if you want something specific as far as like an artist. I think the point I'm trying to make is that you should just live within your means when it comes down to this stuff. Have a plan, stick to it. Or go to a card show and try to find out what it is to be a collector like I did.
Okay, so I spent a good couple hours here and it was fun. And I think one of the things that was really cool to see was that there's so many families and parents and people just buying things, all kinds of people. People my age, obviously older people who are into sports cards or people who are just into sports. And really enough, I feel like people are gravitating towards more of the Pokemon stuff than the sports stuff, but I could be wrong. And I think these shows kind of have an effect on you of buying random stuff, which I did. So I bought a slab, a PSA 10 illustration rare. Then we got a single for that. And then another Eevee. I really wanted Eevees today. This one is Pokemon stamped, or Pokemon Center stamped. And then we got Umbreon GX, the Rainbow Rare, which is really nice.
I think I spent a lot more than I wanted to, but I think that's the point. That's what Pokemon does to you. And I know one card show is not going to show everything about being a collector, but it was cool to see that everyone was there, friendly, and having a good time. I think the fact that there are so many kids and vendors being so nice to them was nice to see. So should you get into the Pokemon TCG in 2026? Yeah, I think so. The time I spent learning and as well as playing was good. It was awesome. And I think I will still play casually, and I still will collect casually as well. My algorithm is also now filled with buyer and vendor POVs, pack openings, card history, and other miscellaneous things. There's also like countless things that I didn't talk about but I didn't learn, like the difference between the shadowless cards and not shadowless cards for vintage. Like my dumbass thought it was like the shadow of the Pokemon, not the border. The fact that there are world championship decks is really, really cool. There's also a bunch of modern crazes that I didn't go over, like Burger Pikachu or the Kabuto guy, Gary King Pokemon, and all his controversies, and like a bunch of other stuff that I just didn't go over. People have made careers about talking about this stuff, and I can see why. I think it would be cool to do that, and maybe, you know, in the future, but I think it's just overwhelming for the everyday person. But my goal with this video was to try out the game, and that is the same thing with the other 99 games I'll be playing. I wanted to catch myself up and share everything that I learned with you. And I feel like I've been in the ecosystem and played enough without actually going to a major event, which I still want to do. I want to go to a championship. I want to go to a regional. I want to see and experience the event if I can actually go to one. But here's my verdict on a points basis. And if you want details, I did write some more stuff on my website if you're interested, in the description below. I think the bottom line is that Pokemon and pretty much every other TCG or major TCG or upcoming TCG are in a weird place right now, where people are driving the modern market into buying and selling and trying to make money wherever they can. But I'd say like every hobby has that right now, like that mentality. Show tickets, shoes, and they all have their own version of scalpers as well. It doesn't make it any better, but it is something to understand. I think if you get into any hobby and you get to a point where you are not having fun, then you should probably stop that hobby. For me, it helps to take breaks and to remind myself why I even got into it in the first place. Pokemon was a big part of my childhood, just like many others, and I feel like I have my own reasons of why I keep cards around or why I find value in them. Whether it's when I walked through Little Root for the first time, or when I played Pokemon Silver on my Game Boy Advance, which by the way, still works to this day. Or when I got this. This is the first holo that I have ever opened as a kid. When I was in the first grade, my parents got me packs, and this was the first holo. It was a holo Hitmonchan. This is obviously, well, not obviously, but this is not the same card that I opened, but I picked it up at the card shop, and I thought it was really cool. I thought it was nice to have as a memento of, like, you know, just card games in general. And I do not blame anyone for selling their cards or trying to make money. I'm doing that too, and I always have. If you want to play the TCG, do it. It's cheap. You have a lot of resources. You have so much support. If you want to collect casually, you can. There are so many cards and so many artists. Here are my favorites. If you want to become a vendor, do it. I mean, there's a lot of people doing it, but honestly, the market is slowing down this part of the year, and there's a lot of people going to other card games, so there might be more space. I say, whatever you do, just have fun with it. I'll see you in the next one.